Hey, everybody. Welcome to today's episode. I am thrilled to have Danny Frazer on today. He has spent nearly 30 years working in wilderness therapy and behavioral health care, including co-founding Open Sky Wilderness Therapy in 2006 and serving in leadership roles across the organization. For 6 of those years, he worked in admissions at Open Sky, speaking with and supporting thousands of families as they navigated the difficult decision of whether residential treatment was the right step for their family. Those conversations deeply shaped how he understands the realities parents face with contending with an at-risk child. Today, he works as a leadership and business coach, helping leaders in behavioral healthcare navigate these complex, high-stress environments. And he is an active parent of 2 boys, including a teenager, an experience that continues to ground his work and perspective. I had the most awesome experience interviewing and having a chat with Danny Frazer just about a message he'd like to share with parents. Thank you so much for being here. Please enjoy. Hey, Danny, I'm so glad to have you here. Thanks for coming.
Beth, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Yes, me too. Me too. Okay. Oh, there are a lot of questions I might have for you, but, want to dial it in a little. In my experience, right, which has only been 8 or 9 years in this field of wilderness and struggling kiddos and whatnot, Open Sky really does stand out. And not just to me in being in the field and talking to therapists and executive directors and the people I might run into at a conference or whatever, but the many, many moms and dads, parents that I talk to, Open Sky is highly talked about. It's sought after. It has, in my book, it has a great reputation. And of course, you guys weren't perfect, but I'm so curious, where did that come from? And was it hard to work on that reputation? That sounds like a silly question, but I'm so curious on that. And what do you think made it stand out? That's a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot, Beth. Well, thank you and great question. Yeah, and there's a number of, I think, answers to that because it's complicated. And we closed, a couple of years ago. It's hard to believe, Beth. We were around for
Yes,
18 years, and it's about 2 years ago that we announced it, and it's still mind-boggling to me that we're no longer in operation.
I
Um,
bet.
Especially under the circumstances and even what you framed, which is sort of like the esteem that we were regarded in, which it gives me a little solace in the grieving process because what it meant was we had an impact on parents
Yeah.
and families and young adults and children. And by no means were we perfect, but we did, I think, have a significant impact on so many of these struggling parents and their children. And
Mhm.
I think shaped a lot of lives. And why or how we came to be, who we are, I think it's worth kind of reflecting on our origin story. And for
Okay.
one, we worked together. Of the 9 of us as sort of original partners, 8 of us worked together at a program called Aspen Achievement Academy, which for your audience, they may not know this because they haven't been around for quite a while, but they were the first wilderness program to employ a licensed clinician. So
Wow.
wilderness therapy, quote unquote, had existed before this moment in time. Maddie Liebing, if you know that name, she actually has been one of the team members at Legacy and their Juniper Canyon program. She's been in the field a long time. She's credited with being the first licensed clinician, in her case, a psychologist, working in a wilderness program. And so Aspen is where we cut our teeth as staff members. And so for us, actually, the majority of those 9 of us worked as field staff. So when Open
Oh,
Sky started, we kind of owe it to our legacy a bit that we worked at one of the most reputable programs in the country. In fact, Gil Hallows, who was their executive director for a long time before starting Legacy, would talk about sort of Aspen as the aspen tree. And if you know an aspen tree, they're actually they shoot up sort of
yes.
clones, right? And a
Yeah.
number of programs can trace their lineage back, including programs like Outback or Wingate and Second Nature. I mean, there's a bunch elements. I mean, there's just a lot of programs out there that can sort of attribute their origin. So we had that as a backbone. Early in our programming, we would often kind of even slip up and say Aspen when we were meaning Open Sky because we had such a great foundation from which
Mm.
to start to run Open Sky. And
That matters. I'm
we had known it intimately in that way because we had been there as field staff and therapists and even people in leadership positions there. But we also saw things that we felt like were absent and were missing. And I would say it was in large part our CEO, Aaron Fernandez, and his personal experience before Open Sky with his brother, who actually attended Passage to Recovery, which was a
Mm.
sister program of Aspen. He was in his late 20s and struggling with mental health and substance abuse. And Aaron had kind of recommended to his parents and to his brother to look at this. And his brother said, you know what? I think this could be what I need. And along the way, Aaron was someone who was an informed kind of consumer, right? Working for Aspen Achievement Academy, but he was now a sibling with a family whose son is in treatment. And along the way, he was kind of routinely disappointed, Beth, because the focus was just on his brother. And Aaron had
Mm.
this belief that, like, wait a minute, like my parents have a part in this. I have a part in this. There's a bigger system at play. And he
Wow.
kind of was left wanting. Like, yes, Steven's getting a great experience, but it was sort of like, wait a minute, like if we don't also address some of these dynamics that are contributing, I don't think he's going to get what he deserves. And so I think that personal experience coupled with our own experience at Aspen, which was that to a certain extent, and I think they were beginning to make headway. This was late, I'd say 2004 and 5 is when I think the field started recognizing, like, wait a minute, like we've got to do more. And I'll even give credit to Troy Faddis and Aspen. They were doing more with graduation and parent programming, but there was still a little bit of like, hey, it's been hard on you. You should drop your kid off, take a much needed vacation, and a little bit of a
Oh,
narrative of like, you'll do a little bit of work. You need to get some tools, but we're going to fix your kid. You'll come back and pick him up and everything will be great. That was kind of a bit of the narrative, right?
well, kind of.
Yeah.
I think that's what I got. So that's so interesting that someone in charge had that
Mhm.
experience and was able to say, wait a second, that's not how it goes, actually. That's really
Yeah.
awesome.
And so one of our founding partners was Pam Parsons Dupuis. She was a marriage and family therapist. She'd been the clinical director at Aspen, had been the executive director at Passage Recovery. She shared that same philosophical bent, which
Mm.
is like, we have to treat the whole family. And so when
Yes.
Open Sky started, there are a number of sort of spokes on the wheel, but one of them on a very deep personal level for our CEO, and I think shared by all of us, was like, we really have to enroll the whole family in this treatment experience, not just the identified patient. And so from the very beginning, there was a yearning, a desire, an awareness, a longing for that. And it just kind of took on a life of its own. And we took some risks. I mean, we did things that no one had ever done that were bold. We got
Yeah.
every family member, maybe their kid just arrived yesterday, Beth, and we wanted them on a parent call on a Sunday evening. And we wanted to facilitate a connection and a dialogue. They might be
Oh,
in utter panic. There might be another one whose kid's 4 weeks in and they just got the letter saying, hey, the manipulative letter about like, I'm being abused out here, all the way to someone who's, at week 9 about to graduate. We put them all together on the phone. Like, that could be a hot mess. One might be disappointed in their consultant. One might have got a discount. One might
oh,
not like what the therapist told them. And then you put them together. Like, that was unheard of because they thought the risks were too high. We saw the benefit. We saw what people were yearning, which is parents to connect with their parents, to learn and support one another. And like, we just created form and boundaries and a way we expect you to engage, and they ate it up. And it became like
yeah.
this parallel program, which is like, hey, you don't just have your kid working on their stuff. If you're going to enroll, you're going to actually look in the mirror and you're going to address things, and you're going to have to make shifts and adjustments because this whole system has to change for that child's gains in this program, which, like any wilderness program, will be significant. But if you don't do the
Right.
work, it's not going to matter. And so not
Yes.
only that, we had them come in person. Here's the thing. We had families from 30 plus countries. We expected them to show up usually within about a month at what we call the Parent Wellness Weekend, which was a parent focused weekend where they looked inward. They were using some of the same skills, getting some of the same experience. We'd do meditation, we'd eat a healthy meal, we'd go on a walk in nature, we'd do some group process, some psycho ed. But guess what? They might have come 4 time zones away. They weren't going to see their child. And we wanted them to
Wow.
physically be here. And
Yes.
and so what we were doing is we were creating a parallel experience, giving them a similar kind of tool set, something they can empathize with their child. But what we're ultimately doing is helping them shift how they relate to themselves, their partner, and their family. And then
Yeah.
that way, when they do reunite, they're all in a different place. They're all much higher functioning. And it was crazy early on, Beth. You'll appreciate this. before we started looking at it with more of an empirical lens of like, what is this working or not? Because we were asking ourselves that. We were hearing anecdotes from field staff, from therapists, from parents post wellness weekend. They didn't see each other. That there would
Right.
be these shifts, there would be these like noticeable gains. And it was just literally something in the air because mom and dad are looking in the mirror, maybe getting into their heart space, into their soul. There's something happening on a wavelength that would go from the Durango
Yeah.
administrative office out across the mountains to the desert if they're out
Oh,
there, and you would see these shifts. And so we were getting a lot of positive reinforcement that like this parent
yeah.
work is game changing. And then you started to see the whole field begin to recognize, hey, wait a minute, it's not an add-on. And for us, that thing, if you back to your question, why did it keep us kind of in high regard? It was part of our origin story. It wasn't like,
Yeah.
oh, we should do that so we could get market share. We did it
Right.
because we knew
Or
it would
everyone
actually
else is
make a
doing
difference.
this. I guess
Yeah.
we better get on the, jump on the
Yeah.
wagon.
Yeah.
That makes so much sense. It really, I'm like on the verge of elation and crying because it's what I ran into, right? It's like, wait a second. What about me? I'm going to drop my son off and I'm going to sit here and stew is what I'm going to do, right? My anxiety is just going to go like, I'll have a few seconds of relief and then I'm going to start worrying about what the heck I'm going to do when he gets home because no one's telling me anything. No one's teaching me. And so the truth of what you guys, I guess, realize is, I think is extremely unique. I do. Because when I came onto the scene in like 2018, I still think, I swear, but this is just my very small perception from a parent side is like, you guys were still the only ones doing it, but I didn't find out until, we had already done everything. So anyway, just really interesting. And then that's okay because that set me on my own journey of trying to figure myself out and it's all good. But it is interesting that you found that truth and you lived it and you created it for others. It's really great.
Yeah, you'll appreciate this, Beth. And the research is showing this now for those parents who are on the phone, or I should say, listening to this. You know, I used to have parents ask, like, what makes a difference? Like, why will this work or not? And it was interesting because it wasn't that I had like, I guess an answer that I could say is proven, but I knew it and we knew it, which was essentially the work you do as a parent is the single biggest predictor of your child's success. And parents were a little bit like, wait a minute, my kid's the one who's off the rails. Wait a minute, my kid's not going to school. My kid's smoking pot. My kid's doing X, Y, and Z. And we just sort of knew over time that when the parents showed up completely and fully, were willing to step in and look in the mirror and make headway and progress, they're sending an enormous message to their child. Their child is not a problem to be fixed, that they too have something as a parent to learn and to shift. And it's also what they have control over. You don't have control over your son or daughter. You only have
It
control over
turns out.
yourself. And interestingly, and you'll appreciate this, the research has sort of borne this out. And when NATSAP, the National Association of Therapeutic Schools and Programs, took this massive collection of data, and I think you've sat in on some of these presentations by Dr. Joanna Bevan Schaefer and and I believe it's Laura Mills and maybe a few others have really sort of dissected this. Essentially, the single biggest predictor of success in residential treatment programs in this NATSAP database, which is massive, is parent engagement. That's not parents getting it perfect. That's not parents, it's showing up and being engaged and taking advantage of every opportunity that that program provides. It basically has a huge causal relationship. The success for that child is going to be much better. And so, we knew this kind of anecdotally. We ended up looking at it more empirically as our program evolved. And it's consistent with family systems therapy and what they know of research. But it's
Well, I
super
just
cool.
I have to say to the audience, I have not paid Danny to say this. It's just the truth. If you're going to name a soapbox, my like biggest soapbox is that like the change starts with us. It does. It has to.
Yeah.
Because it's the only thing we can control. And
yeah.
That's right. That's so great. Okay. So maybe a little getting into how you grew
Mm,
while you were one of the founders of Open Sky, is there,
mhm,
I guess, just something to share that was maybe a hard time in there or
mhm.
something that really affected you personally, within regards to, of course, Open Sky and whatnot, but just, I don't
Mhm.
know, tell us a fun story.
Yeah, good question, Beth. And I kind of feel like there's a couple places I could go. Let me just say to those out there, anybody who's endeavored to start a program that runs 24/7 through 65, like it's an enormous commitment. And the responsibility is humbling. I mean, we take on a vulnerable young person, a family in disarray. And then on top of that, in our case, we then take them outside. I mean,
Yeah,
just talk about like, we are, of course, young and energetic and, excited and enthusiastic to do this because we knew how potent it was to get people outdoors and we loved it. We did it on the ground floor. Like I was a field guide and I've had a ton of different roles. I was a field staff, field director, it was a trainer, I've helped run operations. I did marketing, business development, admissions, program director. I've had a bunch of jobs. The best job, hands down, Beth, being a field staff, being
yeah.
out there on the ground, sleeping on the ground, seeing the stars, hands down, the most magical.
I feel
And
like that was
yet,
sort of like a missed somehow I missed that in my life. I think I was supposed to do that at some point in my which
mm,
I did.
mm,
I got a little bit of a chance, but please go on.
yeah.
It's good stuff.
Yeah. So along the way, once you kind of get out of the kind of go-go stage of just getting it going, it can take its toll
Mm,
because you're holding so much and things happen. When you take a population that's going to take risks, that doesn't want to be there are just breakdowns and it causes reflection, but it also can result in tension and disagreements. And so
sure.
there's even some research that suggests that like organizations working with those who struggle with mental health can start to actually take on some of the attributes of their client. And again, thinking from a systems perspective, you're holding a lot of dysfunction, a lot of trauma, right? So you have to be able to sort of hold that, but sort of elevate above it. So be in it and be of it, but elevate above it. And it's hard, right? It's that idea of kind of vicarious trauma or compassion fatigue. And so we certainly and I certainly, had some moments and it actually kind of came to a head, gosh, maybe about 7 years into it, into running Open Sky. And I was in conflict with the CEO, our partner, and I had made a number of missteps and we had some disagreements, which is inevitable, right? When you run a business and I was at a low point, kind of contemplating like, "Hey, is this for me? Like, do I have what it takes?" Because I don't feel like I have this zest and passion for it. I don't feel like I'm contributing the way I was. I'm kind of at odds, and we're in disagreement around some things in the direction that organization's going. And my wife said, "You should sit down with my friend Elizabeth. She happens to be an executive coach." And it was for me, Beth. In terms of parallel process, and now that I'm in leadership coaching and business coaching and consulting, if you look at organizations or leaders, the ones who just the same thing might be said for families, same thing might be said for all of us. When we sort of get stuck or we're at a low point, I think there's a little bit of a mythology, especially in our country, like, oh, I can just work harder, or I can pull myself up my bootstraps. I can find the right
Right.
podcast, the right book. I can have a conversation with a friend. And sometimes what you need is someone who's objective, independent, kind of removed, who's a professional, who can help you, sort of uncover those blind spots and begin to build new habits and patterns and be a
Yeah.
champion, but also someone who can confront you. And that's what my wife kind of introduced me to, and someone who I then worked with for nearly a decade. And it helped me forge a much healthier relationship with my team members, a much healthier perspective on myself, helped me recognize that I had patterns and habits that were sabotaging some of my relationships and
Yeah.
actually minimizing or reducing my authority. And so that is something that I look back on as like this gift, despite being like stressed and overwhelmed and, in a lot of conflict and a state of uncertainty. Like that was my hero's journey, sort of. I
Yeah.
needed someone to kind of pull me out of it and help me become the person that Open Sky needed, the organization needed, that I had in me. And so that was one of the greatest decisions that I made. And, to this day, Elizabeth and I are friends, and she's done so much to support me. And, what it enabled me to do is to go from a place where I was floundering and in some ways disconnected, disempowered, to being like moving from sort of, to a position of being again empowered and indispensable. And it took me, instead of pointing the finger or
Yeah,
placing blame, just saying, all right, I got to look at myself, just like we ask parents, you
exactly.
know?
Yeah.
And I was willing to, and it was humbling, and I had to make amends and make some adjustments and have new patterns and behaviors. I had someone to help coach me, and that made it a lot more easier for me. And it got me to a place where I still to this day lean on the lessons I learned from my work with Elizabeth to working with people who are running programs, because it's hard and
Yeah.
it's taxing. And these relationships can be burdened with some conflict and some resentments and regrets. And like, there's ways forward. And sometimes it just helps having someone who's not a part of that system, part of that, stuck inside. I like to say there's the jar and it's got the label. If you're in the jar, you can't see the label. So you don't know the ingredients. You don't know what's going on. And so I'm like, all right, I can be someone who can read the label for you and help you understand what's going on, so you know how to adjust to respond
Oh, I
appropriately.
like that. Oh,
Yeah.
I like that. Oh, thank you. Really, thank you for sharing that. I feel like it humanizes the people who are running the programs, right? And the
Mhm.
therapists. It's like these are just humans
Mhm.
doing the best they can, with the education and the experience and everything. And then they're trying to go home at some point to their families.
Mhm.
And they're not all, but most likely, probably parents as well, trying to show
Mhm.
up for their
Yeah.
kids. And
Mhm.
we're all just really trying to help each other, to be completely honest.
Yeah.
And so I love that story. I feel like it really does humanize. And I love the connection you made as well to parents, right? You're a leader at Open Sky, right? You're like in charge. And then you were mentioned, it is really humbling, I feel like, to say, wait a second, I feel like I need some support. And what
Mhm.
a great example, honestly, to parents as well, because we are hoping to be the leaders in our home.
Mhm.
And I think many parents try to act like they know everything, try to
Mhm.
act perfect, even though it's like cognitively, oh yeah, we're not supposed to be perfect. But then, the friends and the neighbors and the relatives or something are kind of looking in, and we're
Mhm.
thinking, I'm supposed to know what to do here. And I don't. I don't have any
Mhm.
idea. Right.
Mhm.
Because this kid used to be really nice and hug me, and now he hates my guts or
Mhm.
whatever.
Yep.
And so
Yeah. Yeah, we tell
thanks for
ourselves
being that example.
stories, and some of those are reinforced by our family system. Some of those are reinforced by our society about like, oh, we should have it all figured out.
Hmm.
And then we get stuck. And sometimes, unfortunately, it takes some pain and suffering before you're like willing to ask for help. Hopefully, it's not so extreme that you've sacrificed substantially or your relationships have suffered substantially. But yeah, it was that sort of moment, that kind of aha and moment of clarity that I look back on. And it was a little fortuitous too, but yeah, it was empowering and humbling. And it's not easy to be a parent, just like it's not easy to run a program and, work with people. And yeah, you're right. And I think a healthy program and a healthy relationship with the ones they're serving, they see each other as people and as humans,
Yes.
and
Yes.
that there's a certain dignity and respect that's shared. And again, I think Open Sky, one of the things, back to your question, why perhaps we were held in regard, is that we treated our referring professionals that way. We treated our, psychologists that might come in and do testing that maybe weren't a part of our program. We treated the parents that way. Like, we're
Yes.
equal co-creators in this. It's not us and them. It's
Right.
we. And that there's this idea of partnership. And so I think a lot of the way our clinicians presented themselves, our admissions team, our medical team, is like, we're a part of this together. It's not us to dictate to you or to tell you. It's not that and therefore we're not perfect. And I think there
Right.
was a little more grace with that in that relationship.
Yeah. And
And
mutual respect.
yep. Yeah. So there could
Right.
be feedback. I mean, that's part of it, is like,
Yes.
hey, parents have something to say. Like, we don't dismiss that off, hand. It's like, hey, there's an issue. And it might come across my desk when I'm a program director. Instead of being like, oh, that's kind of far-fetched, it's like, no, let's actually think about that, because we're here to serve them and they're actually in partnership with us. And granted, they've entrusted us to work with their kid, and granted, there might be some dysfunction, but they're also people who have something to offer and their perspective is meaningful. And that was, again, our
Yeah.
approach was not this top-down kind of, hey,
Mhm.
listen to us, we're the experts. It's more like, hey, we've got a lot to offer, and obviously you're going to trust us to do that, and we're going to do this together in partnership. And there might be things we don't know that would help for you to tell us. And I
Yeah.
think we took that philosophically with our students, sort of to bring it to another level. And this is where I
Mm,
think it comes out of the
love it.
origins of Aspen is kind of unconditional positive regard. Like a kid showed up, we didn't see them as this like broken human being. We saw them for the potential that lies in them. And again, I think because we shared as a team this sort of that humanistic kind of psychology perspective, which is everyone has worth,
Yes.
regardless of how bad they sound behaviorally. And because we had that view about the family system, we had that view about them, they then start internalizing that. And
Mm,
so what it is we're giving them hope, and saying, hey, no, you're worthy. And so
yeah.
when I think our kids, and granted, not every kid, not every student who attended Open Sky, reflects back with fondness, but I know a lot of people in this field, a lot of them do. And we were shocked when we closed the
Yeah.
number of parents and the number of students who reached out, far out of proportion to those naysayers who are like, thank goodness you're closed.
Oh,
To say
I
thank you.
bet.
And that was
Yeah.
the place where I found myself, or that was the place that gave me my child back. And it's not because we were magic. It's in part because we believed it was there. They had it. They just needed help getting out of these dysfunctional maladaptive patterns, finding some new patterns and new ways of relating and beginning to thrive. And so I think a lot of them came away feeling, and confident. And you see it in pictures, right? And this because
Yeah.
and the parents will say this time and again, like they show up for graduation to reunite out in the field. And they're like, this is the kid that I've known is there and I haven't seen him
Yeah.
for 2 years. And it's
Yeah.
like,
That's what
you
they
know,
say.
yeah. So that
Like so and
to be
so's
a
back.
part of that, and that's why I'm still wanting to be a part and in part of this field as someone who does coaching and consulting, because more programs than not provide that experience for their these troubled young people and their families.
Yeah. Uh, okay, you have some parents right here in front of you, and I'm just so curious, what would you say? And maybe or what did you say to them even back in the day when maybe at that parent wellness weekend or something? You just have so much experience and so much history working with families. I I guess had a realization like, what do you say to families? What would you say to the parents specifically? I mean, you've already said a couple things, which is a pretty great. I'm just
Mhm.
curious if there's anything else on your heart,
Mhm.
on your mind
Mhm.
that you would want to tell them.
Yeah, maybe give me a little more of a qualifier. Are these families who are contemplating maybe doing something, or families currently, or any family? Maybe is there something in particular to shape this answer?
Great. Okay, good question. Okay, let's go ahead and guide it toward someone who has not sent their kiddo to wilderness or maybe even anything. Maybe they've only dealt with the local help,
Mhm. Mhm.
um, local possibilities. What would you say to them if they're trying to figure out if they should or shouldn't send their kid?
Yeah, Beth, it's a really good, a very important question, and there's no right answer. It's
Fair?
so individualized, right?
Yeah.
Um, And I think there are some things when I look back, and part of my job, I worked in admissions, the 18 years that I, worked at Open Sky, I spent about a third of that time, on the front end working with families, kind of contemplating whether or not
Yes.
to do this. And then if they chose to, then helping them sort of orchestrate that.
It's an
And
essential role, by the way,
yeah,
because
yeah.
I just remembered talking to
Mhm,
several, and
mhm,
one of them actually said, "You know, I don't think it's quite time yet. Be looking for
mhm,
this, this, and
mhm,
this."
mhm,
So
mhm.
I was
Yeah,
surprised they didn't say, "Oh, yeah, 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 no, no, we've got
yeah,
this."
yeah, 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 yeah. So, yeah, and that would be my answer too, is like, this is for you to decide as parents, not for us to tell you whether you should do it. Now, are there some
Right.
telltale signs? Yes, sometimes it's medically indicated, right? It's like, oh my gosh, they're currently in the hospital for an overdose. Like, oh, and this is their third, or, like there are
Yeah.
some indications that are really strong. There are some indications that are maybe a little weaker, if you will. And ultimately, at least in my case, and my belief is like, this is a family decision. So it has to be
Mm.
sort of guided by their values and the circumstances and the resources that they have. And every community is different in terms of what they've got. Every family is different in terms of what they value and what resources they have to. Um, I think there's a few things that stand out to me, and one is talking with other parents who've been down this road is one of the most valuable things they can do.
Nice.
And that's parents who've both chosen to do something like, residential, to parents who've not, but have had a child struggling. And I know that's part of what you've helped kind of do with your podcast, is like you're creating a forum for people to connect with one another. And I think you've done that maybe through social media and other channels, but there's nothing quite like resourcing other parents who've been in your shoes,
Mm.
because they're going to get it in a way that a program person or I can't, or even a professional can't. Because part of what I think parents need is just someone who's been down that road to sort of be someone to just empathize and guide and support. And so, I know a lot of programs, one thing you can do is certainly talk to the program about, hey, do you have parent references? Ask for a
Love
few
that.
and reach out to them and bring them questions and help you process through your decision by sort of processing theirs. And then, you know, there's a lot of different ways to go with this. You obviously have to have confidence in the program. There's a few things to look for, Beth. I'd be happy to kind of expound on that. Sort of like, okay, how do you determine if now's the time or not? I could expound on that. So I don't know if you want me to sort of, I could bounce between both of
Definitely.
those.
Yeah, definitely go in, because I was thinking that when you were talking about the leaders actually, working on themselves and including themselves in the growth and stuff, I thought
Mhm, mhm,
that's one thing you could look for in a program is, hey,
mhm.
are the people in charge? Do I actually get to see them face to face? How much does that matter? That kind of thing. So yeah, let's go there first.
Totally. Yeah, so that's interesting because a good program is a program that has signed up to be scrutinized by their peers. In particular, they're a part of an industry association that has real standards. It's not just a
Right.
rubber stamp, advocacy group, but it's actually an organization where no, we have to put ourselves to the test of a third party. So in the case of Open Sky, we were OBH accredited, Outdoor Behavioral
Mm.
Healthcare accredited, meaning we had to open our doors to whoever that accrediting body said, hey, we're going to bring them. And they're going to look at everything and they're going to talk to parents, talk to students. They're going to look at your files. So you're basically saying, hey, I'm willing to be transparent and open to scrutiny because I
Great.
see value in learning. In other words, I know that for us to continue to improve, we have to learn and be open to feedback and criticism. And so you want to look for a program that, you know, obviously they're confident and they have something to offer and they feel good about what it is, but equally so, they're also, you know, continuously wanting to learn and grow and sort of continue to be a part of something bigger. If they're isolated and they're not doing something like that, I think that to me would raise red flags because it kind of indicates maybe they are in an echo chamber or maybe there's some, for lack of a better word, arrogance. You really want them to be kind of challenged, scrutinized, and to be kind of evolving and growing with their field.
Love it. I love that answer.
Yeah. Yeah,
Anything else?
and well, yeah, in terms of, contact with, leadership, yes, and I'm biased. Early on, our CEO made it a point to attend, and I kid you not, for probably in excess of a decade, every month's wellness weekend, meet face to face with every family. It got harder as we got bigger, but we
Sure.
always would have, and I was one of these people, as was Emily, others. We always wanted there to be a representative of ownership meeting with our parents when they physically showed up here.
Absolutely.
And that would be the case either when they came for that mid-stay kind of what we call parent wellness weekend or at the end of graduation. Like it was vital. And you know what? Sometimes they would ask in the admissions process, like, hey, I want to talk to someone who runs this. And in my case, I really believe the best programs are locally run and locally operated, and they're not run by private equity. And again, I'm biased, not that you can't have good
Yeah.
programs, but I happen to
Right.
believe that like the programs that have ownership that outrun that, I think provide the highest degree of care and are the most attentive to families. And so I think you're right. I think there's something about like who owns this and are they operators and are they engaged and present and can I talk to them as opposed to, oh, it's private equity and it's about margin. And again, like I
Yeah.
would be wary, not that there aren't good options and your insurance might direct you that way, but like I just think like, hey, if there's owner operated, to me that means something. And I know you
Yeah.
have personal experience from that. And I think, I know a lot of people that run programs and, yeah, I think a lot of them would share that sentiment.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's so great. I think it's so true that every family has to make this decision on their own. Are there maybe red flags a family can look for where it starts to feel like, yeah, it's getting really close
Mhm.
to thinking about sending their kiddo or even talking to their kiddo, right? About
Yeah.
how do you want to handle this? You're not doing well, you know?
Yeah.
Or you it's
Yeah.
kind of hard. It's a big ask.
It's
So yeah,
hard. It's hard. And so one of the things that I encourage parents to do is to get perspective other than their own.
okay,
So
great.
sometimes parents, they're talking to themselves and they're seeing it one way. And I think and a lot of parents do this, just do your due diligence, talk to the school, talk to if there's a coach or something involved, if there's a counselor, like do your best to gather information from other sources. In the outdoors, there's this concept called triangulating, which what that means is if you have a map and a compass and you can see some high points, you can shoot
Right.
bearings to kind of get oriented to where you are if you're lost. And
Yeah.
that's really like drawing on other information to really be like,
Mm,
okay, we're not off our rocker. Like this is like, yeah, there are signs that people are seeing outside the context of our home.
yeah.
Um, Typically if parents have like exhausted options, meaning they've kind of gone to the next easiest option, like, hey, we've tried psychiatric medication, we've tried, working with the school, we've got a counselor, like, if you've tried the resources that are most accessible and there's just not headway or traction and you're still seeing a lot of the same patterns, that would be an indication that something's not shifting, something's not working. So, oftentimes when you get to considering residential, like you've probably exhausted the options. And again, every community is different. Some communities have a very shallow depth of resources. Some have, a really deep and wide breadth of options. Ideally, there's something that you can do locally and you can head this off and you can make headway. And if those haven't, done enough and your child's still engaged in behaviors that are maladaptive, that are resulting in risks to themselves or others, that's where, and again, my philosophical leaning is as a parent, I think you have an obligation to intervene to protect your child and to get them to a place where they're not going to, God forbid, cause harm to themselves or others. And
Yeah.
and the field gets a lot of criticism around this indication question. And it's there's a hindsight bias that aggravates me,
Oh,
because it's called, there's a name for it. It's kind of like post fact bias. It's like, yeah, after the matter, that looks really clear. But in the moment, there's a lot of ambiguity and uncertainty and a lot of yellow and orange flags. And I've gotten this call, Beth. I've had a family call me to say, I know we were in the missions process. Our child just died. Like that is
oh,
real too. And I don't think we've given
right.
the criticism the space to be like, there are so many lives we've saved, but it was still a prediction. It was still a leap of faith that parents took
Totally.
because they didn't know and they were doing the best, and it's ambiguous. This isn't like you got a broken arm on an x-ray. I mean, there
Yeah.
are those occasions, like, yes, the kid's suicidal and they had an overdose. There are the sort of,
Right.
hard line, but there's a lot of this middle gray area that's like,
Yeah.
and you're pulling your hair out as a parent. And this is where programs owe it to the parents not to take advantage of that and to
Right.
really have some differentiation there and say, this is your decision. Now, I'm a resource. I'm happy to give you perspective. We can give you our perspective on the clients we work with, but this is your call. And the
Yeah.
same way that once your kid's here, whatever you do afterwards is your call. And even how you respond to
Right.
their letters and what you do with therapy is your call as a parent. Like, we're not going to take away your
Right.
agency, but there's a big gray ambiguous area. And some people's parents thresholds or tolerance is going to be different than others.
Totally.
But everyone wants their child to thrive and wants them to be alive. And I generally encourage them to be, more conservative and cautious, but I never wanted to be alarmist. And I
Right.
ultimately had to empower them to make that decision.
Yeah. I think that's so fair. I just will say, just in my experience, that when we first made the phone call, they asked about, school attendance. They asked about grades. And at the time, he was going to school and his grades were like, okay, because it was the kind of the beginning of school. And so it put in my mind like, oh, that's helpful. That's something to kind of look out for. It doesn't mean you should send him as soon as he misses a class, right?
Mhm,
But
mhm,
as he started to literally disappear, not only from school, but from our home, and that kind of started to build up, it was in my mind like, oh, I, maybe I should call back. And it had been a good couple months. And so
mhm,
it gave me something,
mhm,
something to
mhm,
help my mind, wonder like, should I call now? How about now?
mhm.
It's just very, like you said, it's so ambiguous. It's so great. Every parent has a different tolerance level. It was
Mhm.
so hard. It was like probably one of the most hardest decisions I've ever made, hands
Yeah,
down.
yeah,
So hard.
yeah.
And then of course, the kids are making bad decisions and sometimes a little bit better decisions, and
Mhm,
they fluctuate, right? And
mhm,
it's like we tend to, as parents, I feel like we hang on to, oh, they went to school today, oh, I think things are okay, but they
mhm,
missed the last 10 days or whatever it
mhm,
is.
mhm.
And really tricky, really
Yeah,
tricky.
I mean, there's another thing that's fascinating, and I don't know what you might call it. I mean, I'm a parent, but we have a natural bias. It's probably in our DNA of like wanting to see our kids as what they are, the beautiful souls that came into our lives
Mhm.
and their potentiality. And I think it does color our perception a little bit. I think it feeds this reluctance a little bit.
Sure.
One way I look at it, and maybe this sounds kind of contradictory to what I even said earlier, but like it was really rare, Beth, if not almost never, that parents regretted sending their child after the matter. And it was just an
That's very
interesting
interesting.
thing I've reflected on.
Yeah.
Do parents wish maybe they had done it a little differently, or maybe, but it's interesting. And I think part of it's because they rack their brains, they pull their hair out, they want to make the best decision. I think it's rare that it's a flippant, impulsive decision to do something like
Right.
this. And a lot of them have been through a lot and they take it really, really seriously. And they're not just hiring people to, come get their kids and deal with their problems. Most parents um, are agonizing, and if you're getting to
Indeed.
that point where you're agonizing, and then on top of that, maybe you've lost some control and influence, you're not seeing things heading in the right direction, you've exhausted options. An option like a wilderness program, like Open Sky, or any of the really reputable, which is what's out there now, the programs out there that do wilderness therapy in this immersive way that are still there, that have survived this
Mm.
contraction, are great programs. They've endured this. Almost all of them at one point, if not currently, hold an accreditation as an outdoor behavioral health care program. Like these are places that give families hope, they give children hope too. They give them resources. They give them a real life changing transformational experience. So much so that when I'm on this Senate admission, it's kind of interesting to kind of toggle back and forth between imagining being a parent and then sort of working in a program, because we did see a range, right? We would see one kid who in a certain family wouldn't have been sent, but in their family, like, oh, they should have been sent a year ago, right? Because it
Right.
varies. There's not this like, oh yeah, everything is sort of cut and dry. There's a variety of sort of suffering and struggle that families tolerate. But what we saw, and you see this in the data, regardless, there is significant progress. And my
Mhm.
one of my former clinical directors at Open Sky kind of joked, he had a baby and he made some comment about putting money aside for wilderness. And I'm like, what does that mean? Are you implying that your kid's going to need it? No, he was like, to the contrary, they will benefit from it regardless. And,
Right.
and, and, and so it's
Yeah.
interesting. On the one hand, it's a huge decision. You've got to do your due diligence. Don't do it flippantly. And, and the research shows if there is a degree of dysfunction, there will be gains, significant gains in health,
Yeah.
even if there's a variety of acuity. And that's because of what it is. It is
Yeah.
just something that benefits everybody. And I know you might have some parents who might hear because they have another kid like you did, who's actually doing great. And this is the circumstances I'm in now, which is like, okay, what are opportunities analogous to this that isn't a wilderness treatment program? And there are great
Right.
things out there. Outward Bound, National Outdoor Leadership School. There's a program locally called Deer Hill Foundation. There are great experiences that get kids outdoors that do things similar around character development, learning communication, and leadership, that I wish every kid, even
Yes.
those who are just typical teenagers dealing with typical issues, had the experience to do in the way that a wilderness program does, because I think it's universally, profoundly valuable to be outside, immersed in
Absolutely.
nature, learning how to connect, sitting around a campfire. overcoming these perceived limitations.
Yep.
And so anyway, I'm on a little bit of a tangent, but
No, you're
hopefully
good.
that's valuable for your listeners.
I think it is. I do actually remember thinking very like, I wish all of my children could have gone to this. I wish they had. I wish I could have gone. That's unique probably as a parent, but I love the outdoors. I'm like, why
You're
can't
not
I
the only
go?
one. You're not the only one. Yeah.
And so I do think there's absolutely, yeah, I can totally see there's some truth to that. Well, as we wrap up, where do you think the wilderness, where is it going? Is this resource going to stick around?
Mhm.
Because I think it would be a travesty if for
Yeah.
some reason, we stopped going outdoors, which I don't think will happen. But like in this fashion, like wilderness therapy,
Mhm.
what do you
Mhm.
think?
I'm glad you've asked, and I'd love to end on this because I'm hopeful. When Open Sky made the decision to close its doors, if you'd asked me this question, back spring 2024, summer 2024, I attended the Wilderness Symposium that fall.
Yeah,
It felt like I was, and I don't know if I think you might have been there, Beth, but
I
it was
was. It
in
was like a
St.
wake.
George. Yeah. And it was heavy. And it was
Oof.
like, oh, there was this like grief and it was palpable. And it would show up in every session. And I was in that cloud for a while and I'm coming out of it. And I actually want to give some acknowledgement to some people. There's just a few people out there. One is Nathan Olson, who runs Best Notes. He was on Alive. If you know that story. Anyway, he's always been someone who's like, no, this will remain. And then what's cool is kind of seeing the ways in which I think it's beginning to start emerge in other places, which is where I think the field is there's a contraction and there will be an expansion, right? Just like every season, we have to have winter before we get to spring. I'm feeling like we're getting to spring. And there's actually a program here locally, Beth. So it's called Lifeways. It was started by someone who worked at Open Sky. And it's this grassroots community based experience that's kind of utilizing more of a community mentor model coupled with wilderness experiences. So they might go rock climbing, they might do a weekend camping, they go backpacking. But what they're doing is they're incorporating kind of the best of community mental health with kind of the best of wilderness therapy. And so I know these residential intensive programs like Open Sky, they will be out there because there is a need for that. But I think this sort of more community based, more accessible, maybe,
Mm.
less expensive, being in that sort of continuum where it's like, okay, they're not off the rails and they don't need to leave the state, but like, oh, they're vulnerable and they clearly have need, but there's something here that can utilize the outdoors, that connection, that bond you get with staff, with authority figures. It's so different when you're outside.
Yes.
And enrolling families and maybe creating experiences where they get in nature. Like I think there's a dawn of a new era. It's coming and I'm hopeful and I'm way more optimistic than I was, a year or so ago. And I'm looking forward to seeing how that unfolds and seeing communities have these options within, hopefully
Mm.
soon.
Oh, I love that. That's great. And it's so interesting what, what will grow after the fire burns kind of a thing,
Mhm,
right?
mhm,
What little buds come up
mhm,
through the earth and present themselves
mhm,
as new and unique and brilliant. And I'm excited to see it. And I think the truth of outside being a healer, Mother Earth being a healer on her own
mhm.
will hopefully prevail. Truly, because it's a real thing humans, I feel like,
Yeah, and
desperately
that's
need.
shared. I mean, like, I
Yeah.
remember talking with parents, like, everybody's like, "Oh, of course." Like, we all
Yeah.
have fond memories of like, "Oh, the time we spent at the lake or we go skiing." There's something about like just getting outside and what it does for our spirit. And so you're right. It's in our DNA, it's in our nature. It's just gonna need to look different. It's gonna be more nuanced. It's gonna be more sophisticated in certain ways, So I'm looking forward to it. I want to continue to be a part of it. I'm glad that you've given me this opportunity to share some of Open Sky's history and share maybe a little glimpse as to what's to come. And I'm so pleased to have been able to have this conversation and grateful for what you're providing for parents out there because I know you're a glimmer of hope and for a lot of people in moments of
Thanks.
deep darkness. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for that. And thank you so much for spending time with me today and for sharing with the audience. And I think there's lots of parents who would want to have your dial straight into your phone. But we're going to provide
Yes.
a podcast instead because that's appropriate.
There you go.
But thank you. Thanks, Danny. I really appreciate it.
Awesome.
Okay. Bye, everybody. Thanks.